The Viking theme has been a hot property in the board gaming market for a number of years now, and I want to talk about my favorite Viking game, one that I backed on Kickstarter probably 3 or 4 years ago, and you couldn't get it very easily except through Kickstarter. But recently, Renegade Games has brought it out. It's on shelves now, and it's still, after all this time, my favorite Viking game. So, my review today is Raiders of the North Sea. In Raiders of the North Sea, players take the roles of Viking warriors, attempting to assemble a crew, amass provisions, and setting sail for faraway lands to plunder as much treasure as they can. On a player's turn, they have two options. They can stay in the village to work, or they can sail north to raid. When a player chooses to work, they're going to use the action spaces that are in the village to prepare for their raiding campaign. You always have one Viking meeple in your hand at the start of your turn, and you can choose any unoccupied space in the village to place that meeple and take the action associated with it. Then you can take a second action, but this one you must take a meeple off of an occupied space elsewhere in the village and take the associated action. Actions within the village allow you to draw or play townsfolk cards that add to your raiding crew or give you special abilities, and you can collect provisions, silver, and gold that'll help prepare you for your journey. You can also spend iron to build armor for your crew. Many spaces yield different resources depending on the color of Viking meeple that you're using, whether it be black, white, or gray. You start the game with one black meeple, but you'll have to kidnap gray and white meeples from the settlements you raid. Speaking of raiding, when you decide to raid, you take the meeple in your hand and you place them on one of the settlements north of the village. Each settlement has a criteria you have to satisfy before raiding it. It includes ample provisions and having a large enough crew. Then you roll the dice and add your strength to it. Strength is determined by your crew and your armor. If you're successful, you snag all the loot and kidnap the meeple located on the settlement. Now that you're amassing all this loot, you can start taking the longhouse action in the village. You hand over some of your loot to the chieftain and you score victory points. At the end of the game, the Viking crew with the most victory points is renowned as the most terrifying and reviled Viking crew ever to sail the North Seas. Now, I say that this is my favorite Viking game that I've ever played. And I think the main reason that is because I feel like during the design process, such a focus was on the psychology of fun. Because everything about this game makes you feel good. Now, I'm starting off just with the components here, and I'll get it back to that psychology of fun thing. But the components are gorgeous. I mean, it's very colorful. The artwork is fantastic. Components, you can't beat them. When you set this game up on the table, people walk past me. Every time I set it up, they walk past me like, ooh, what is this? What is this? Because the game just looks so cool on the table. Because during setup, here's where it gets back to the psychology of fun. During setup, you seed the entire board with all of the loot that you can collect when you go raiding as a Viking. And that's how you score victory points. You want to get that loot, and you want to score the points for raiding, and you want to trade it into the chieftain to get some victory points for it. That's where the psychology of fun comes in, because when you start this game out, the entire board looks powerful. It's so full of stuff. There's so many things that you can do, places that you can go, and you covet the stuff on those spaces because not only is it beautiful, it's how you win. So it's a motivating factor the way this game is set up. Initially, it makes you want to get it. And that's the psychology of fun. It pulls you in. It pulls you right into that theme. I want to take that stuff and I want to trade it in for victory points and win. Such a fantastic job with that. Now, going into the gameplay of the game, I'm a sucker for a worker placement game. I love worker placement. Always loved worker placement. And this one is a worker placement game, but there's a twist on that where you take 2 actions per turn. The first one, you place a meeple on an action space, and the second one, you have to take a meeple off of an action space, and you get both actions. What's so cool about that is, essentially, every single action in the game is available to you every single turn. Just not maybe in the order that you would like them to be in, which, I will say, more often than you would think, is a problem. So it feels like it's not that limiting, but boy, is it ever. Like sometimes you just need that silver, but there's a guy on the silver, so you take a different thing. So you can't take that other thing you wanted because you don't have the silver for it. So many cool things about this game. That's the limiting factor to it. It makes it such a fun aspect to the game. And also, it makes it very strategic, looking around the board and what do they want to take? What action spaces do my opponents want to take? And it makes you think, I don't want to put a meeple there because they want to take it up and get that thing later. Cool aspect, very, very cool aspect. And going on further about the different colored meeples. You start off the game with one black meeple and he can do most of the stuff on the board, but when you get those gray and white meeples, those spaces get a little more juicy and you unlock some of the cooler spaces because they are allowed to take them then. And that starts making you think critically about how and when you use those meeples. I mean, you still only have one in your hand, right? But you're going to need a white one on your next turn. So you have to make sure that you pull a white one off. So it makes you think about what action spaces you can actually take. It even limits it down. Like certain of the raiding ports require a white meeple or require a gray meeple. And you really want that white port, the port with the white meeple. You have to have a white meeple at the end of your turn. Makes you think about which action spaces you're going to take. There's a lot more to it than you think. Because I'll tell you, the only thing that I'm not quite as delighted about this game is the fact that it's a little bit light for me. I tend to go for heavier stuff. Doesn't mean I'm great at heavier stuff, but I like heavier stuff. I like to burn my brain out thinking about stuff. And this one's a lot lighter than I normally would want to play. I would probably usually be like, it's a little too light, whatever. But the fact that the fun is there and the enjoyment of playing the game exists, I'm cool with it being lighter. Now, there are expansions that definitely make this a little deeper. That's for sure. There's 2 expansions that you can add to this game that add complexity, they add length to the game, they add a lot of depth and some different choices to it. So if this game, as a base game, isn't something that's heavy enough for you, those expansions might get it to that point. Certainly did for me. It makes it a very, very different experience playing with those expansions. But this review is mostly about the base game. The base game itself, I will play any day in the week just because I love it so much. Now, going back to my thoughts on the psychology of fun. And this game has dice rolling in it. When you go to raid the ports, you have to roll a die. Now that is annoying in a Euro game, some people will say, and me many times too. Champions of Midgard, for example. I get very annoyed with the dice rolling in that game. Well, this one has a very similar theme to that one, but this one, the dice rolls are so very minimal. Because if you're playing even half-as good, you can mitigate those dice rolls away. Your crew members will build up your strength so you can know which ports you can actually take. And your armor will ensure that you can get the ports that you need. And you're not going to go to a port if you can't do it in the first place, or if the luck is just too great. You could, you fail. And here's the thing. When you go to those ports and you fail, you still get the loot. You just don't get the victory points. You get the victory points if you beat the strength of the port. And you get more victory points if you beat it by a lot. So that's the psychology of fun, right? Like there is dice rolling in it. There's a little element of chance and you're all excited, but you're not excited because you might fail. You're excited because you're going to get more. And that's what's cool about this game. It's a great game where you can build towards doing that. You can even build towards ensuring that you get the higher victory point values. So this game rewards playing well as opposed to chancing it. And I appreciate that. It has the fun elements of luck, but luck in the cool direction, not in the you're pissed off direction. So all in all, I adore this game. I really adore this game. And this is a game that is in a trilogy of 3 games. Shipwrights of the North Sea, then came Raiders in the North Sea, then came Explorers in the North Sea. And I got to say, I like all of them. Raiders is my favorite. Explorers is my second favorite, and Shipwrights. Shipwrights is a card game where you're trying to build ships. Very cool game. I really like that one. Explorers in the North Sea, tile placement. You even have a little long ship that you put your meeples in, you sail out, and you're controlling islands and stuff. Both are great games, but Raiders of the North Sea is by far my very favorite. And there's even an expansion that connects all 3 together, so you can play a campaign of all 3 games. Man, they went the extra mile to make this a complete package of a trilogy of games, and all 3 of them are excellent. Highly recommend this game. My favorite Viking game. Check it out. Raiders of the North Sea. Beautiful game. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining me for my review of Raiders of the North Sea. If you've enjoyed this one, if you love board games, card games, miniatures games, role-playing games, you can always check out our audio podcast. You can find it on iTunes or at thesecretcabal.com. And while you're here, do me a quick fave and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click that bell so you'll get alerted when we post more videos. And until next time, have a good one, everybody.